Hunt with passion. Never stop casting. Chase the dream. Welcome to Season 3 of Musky Mastery Outdoors, sponsored by Joe Bucher Outdoors, #1 in big game fish products.
Alright guys, welcome back to my vlog studio here. This is vlog number 8 in the Season 3 series here of the Musky Mastery Show. I can't say it enough. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you for all of your unending support and comments and you name it. I could not do this without you guys and gals. And today we're going to have some fun. I am really excited, as I always am. I mean, you guys know me by now. I mean, I don't think there's a musky lure out there that I wouldn't be excited about. But today, I've got some funny stories for you. We're talking about the Magnum Buchertail. I'm talking about the Double-10, the Big Daddy Buchertail of the entire blade lineup when it comes to inline spinners for JBO. The Double-10 Magnum is the biggest lure in the inline spinner category that Joe Bucher Outdoors produces, and it's just an awesome lure. It's a very situational lure for me in northern Wisconsin and in Canada, where I primarily fish in those two areas. And I want to talk about how I use it, when and why, and why it's such a great lure for me, and you know, just kind of dig into some of my success stories with it. So I'm going to roll the cameras again and show you an opening clip here. And this one's pretty good. This is actually the first muskie segment I ever put out. It kind of had a funny name. It was called High Moon and a Perfect Plan because I actually caught this particular muskie on a moon overhead phase. And well, I'll just let the muskie tell the rest of the story and we'll break it down right after this. Oh my gosh, guys. Oh my gosh. When a plan comes together, you just saw it. Beautiful fish. Wow, there she is, guys. What a gorgeous muskie, guys. It doesn't get any better than that when a plan comes together. Went at this fish on the major period, moon overhead, had her following hot on a double-8 Buchertail tin buck, left her alone for about 4 or 5 hours, came back to her now before a major front's passing through. Gorgeous muskie. Whoa, settle down now. She's all ready to go. We're gonna put her back. Guys, thanks for watching. The water. All right. Man, that's a good looking muskie right there. Oh, there she goes. All right, guys, well, it is time for the big muskie breakdown. How about that? The first muskie segment I ever produced for Musky Mastery. High Moon and a Perfect Plan. Really cool story behind this particular muskie. I'm out fishing with a good buddy of mine, and we were pretty much done for the day. They had to go back home. And we had come to our last spot, and this spot has just been a classic for years. It's a big fish producer. It's like when I don't see a muskie on this particular spot, I'm surprised because I know they're there. And as we're ending our trip on this particular day, in late July, I get a follow-up on a black and nickel double-8 Buchertail Tinsel. So a double-8, and this muskie has got her nose on the double-8. And we do cast back after cast back after cast back on this muskie, and we can't get her to hit. And we finish our day, and I'm just like, man, what a beautiful fish. I really, really wanted to catch it. I was going nuts. And I did what a lot of us have done, and I do, you know, as I've gotten older, I promise I haven't done this as much, but I skipped a family dinner. I know you can't get those back, but you know, we call this a sickness sometimes. It's an addiction, whatever you want to call it. We love it. I'm very passionate about muskie fishing. And so I skipped a big family dinner. I said, Mom, Dad, I can't go to dinner. There's a storm coming in. And we had this big storm front system rolling in. I'm like, if I'm going to get this fish, it's going to be now. Now, you know, just again, spectrum here for time, just to give you an example. I raised this fish initially at like 3 to 3:30 p.m. And I got off the water and I was literally going so goofy, I had to get back on the water. So I launched the boat solo, and literally the coolest thing about this, okay, so, and I knew, so there were a couple things going on. We had the front coming in, and we also had the major period. The major period, I'll have to check my time again. It was probably like 6:30 or 6:45 if I remember it correctly. And I said, look, we got the major period with the moon. We got a storm coming in. I'm going after this fish, but I'm upsizing. And the reason I went with the Double-10 for a variety of reasons, but the biggest reason that we're going to talk about in our you know, when and why is to elicit an aggressive strike from a big fish that was already aggressive. So there's got to be a couple things at play. You know, generally speaking, it's on a big muskie, and it's generally when they've shown some aggression, and it's generally when they've already followed an upsized lure, a larger presentation, and even that didn't get them to commit. So you see why this is so funny is you know, I pull up and I'm literally sharpening the hooks on my Magnum-10, and I hadn't even, it was literally, this is the first cast back on this fish 3.5 hours later. Now, I don't know if any anglers had gone through that spot. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I would assume that maybe there weren't. And it was literally my very first cast. I'm like, oh my God. And this fish comes right into the figure 8 just as she had done 3 hours earlier. But this time on the Double-10, she couldn't resist. It's a big lure. It's got a big presence. It puts off tons of vibration and sound in the water. And you know why? You know that? Because it's hard to retrieve. Most of you folks out there know what I mean. Double-10s are just not easy. So that sealed the deal on this big fish, and that's not the only time that this has happened. That scenario has unfolded numerous other times. I'm going to tell a couple funny stories about a couple of those muskies as we go here. But let's get into the why and when. So generally speaking, I use this, the whole premise of my discussion here on the Double-10 is, for me, and I've kind of gleaned this from Joe over the years, is the Double-10 is a big lure. Now, I know there's some folks out there that cast them all day long, and that's fine. I'm not knocking. You can do your own thing, and I'm sure you guys catch tons of fish on them. I do too, but I use mine what I call situationally. When the situation calls for the Double-10, I throw it. And the situation is generally this. When I have a large muskie that follows aggressively but doesn't attack, what do? That's when I turn up the heat and I go with the big guns. That's when I'm going from a 700 to a Double-10. Or in this scenario that you just saw unfold, I'm going from a Double-8 to a 10. Most of the time, again, if I were to pinpoint like the times that I could say, wow, I mean, this worked, this is textbook, double Magnum-10 at its finest, it's generally on a large muskie. So I'd say muskies in my area of Wisconsin, this is generally muskies that are 42 inches or bigger, 42 to 45 inches or better, and they're usually pretty aggressive. And I'm not throwing this, for example, a lot of times on big muskies that follow really lazily. I mean, I do, but if I were to, again, tell you the textbook time to throw this, It's when you got a muskie that comes in, but she just doesn't commit for whatever reason. She's big, aggressive, and you want to go after her and trigger that response. So again, to sum that up, it is a strategic cast back lure. I am not throwing my double-10s all the time. It's very situational. Again, it's when when I know, it doesn't always have to be a cast back. Let's say, for example, I'm actually thinking of an island in Canada we call King Kong Island. Joe, you know what island I'm talking about. It's a scary island because every year we go to Canada on our Lake of the Woods trip, we raise a muskie off King Kong Island. And the point of this short story is on King Kong Island is, it's not, here's a scenario that I'm talking about. We're throwing a double-10, not as a cast back lure because we're not casting back. We're actually going to throw it on a spot, but we're going to a spot that we know, generally speaking, high percentage of the time we fish the spot holds a giant muskie. We're talking now on Lake of the Woods. This has historically been a muskie that's well over 50 inches, a very, very big fish. So I'm going to throw this lure for all things considered, a short period of time, and it is purposeful. It is purposeful use of the double-10 on a particular spot. So again, summing this up, the why and when, big fish, aggressive, and I'm going to throw it as a cast back, or I'm going into a spot that I know holds that big fish, or I know a spot that consistently holds big fish, and I'm going to throw it then. It's situational. But I also want to flip things a little bit. There's also a certain time of the year when I throw the double-10 and it's not as situational, and that would be in the fall period, the cold water period. I don't know what it is about all of us muskie nuts out there. When it comes time for fall fishing, our minds start thinking big. Muskies gain a tremendous amount of mass from eating consistently and putting on that fat so they can endure a long winter under the hard ice. But it also just, not only does it bring these pictures and images of giant muskies, because we do catch muskies that are on average much heavier than they are during our spring and summer period, but muskies also generally go after larger prey items during the fall. Not all the time, but generally speaking, when am I getting most of my action, my really big lures? It's during the fall period. My 9-inch shallow raters, my double-10 Buchertail Magnum Tinsels, that's when I'm busting out the big stuff in the fall. But I'm going to fish it much differently, and I'm going to talk about technique, but I fish it differently in the fall. And it really is very simple. How do I fish it differently? Just slower. When the water temperature is lower, I slow my retrieve down considerably. And it's actually very easy to do with these giant number 10 blades. All you got to do is crawl it in and real slow roll it through. That bait, just with those blades revolving, produces a ton of sound and vibration in the water. It's just big, it's massive, it's got a big presence. So in the fall, that's my other time when I do actually fish it, much more consistently. I will endure the pain, as we like to say. I'll take the pain and throw it for a long period of time. Now, I also want to talk about a funny story here. And I'll admit, there was a time when I thought this double-10 thing was a bunch of baloney. To a certain extent, I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. Like double-10, what's the difference between an 8 and a 10? So this is, I got to tell you a funny story. You're going to see this photo right now of an awesome muskie that my good buddy Joe Bucher caught. We nicknamed this muskie the butt kicker. In this scenario, guys, so again, if you're wondering here, well, Chaz, I know you're kind of talking a good game about the double-10, but I just don't see myself throwing this thing. If you're saying that, listen to the butt kicker story. This is great. So Joe and I are on our annual Canada trip years ago on Lake of the Woods, and Joe gets a follow-up from a very big muskie on a top raider. And this thing comes in. Again, it's got our key characteristics. Big muskie, aggressive follow, but just doesn't commit. We tried some cast back options on this fish. She didn't go. So Joe and I said, look, we're going to leave this fish alone. We're not going to bother her. We're in the middle of nowhere out on Lake of the Woods. The chances of anybody coming to fish for this muskie are pretty slim to none. So let's leave her alone. So we fished some spots, and as we're fishing, I'm just running my mouth. Double-10s don't mean anything, Joe. Double-10s are overrated. Double-10s, all they're going to do is give you back problems and wrist problems. Double-10s aren't any better than a double-800, man. That's all I was saying. For probably like 2.5 hours. I'm surprised Joe didn't kick me out of the boat. And we get back to the spot, and of course, Joe graciously offers me. And of course, Joe's side in this whole conversation, by the way, is the Double-10 has a time and a place, Chaz. It is for triggering a reaction strike out of a big muskie that we couldn't get to go on anything else. And I said, you should throw a double-8. What's the difference? Well, there is. And Joe graciously gave me the option. He said, hey, we're coming up to this spot. What do you want to throw? You want to throw the top rater that you initially followed on? Or do you want to throw the Double-10? Not the double-8, the Double-10. I, as a youngster, probably, 5 years ago back then, maybe not too young, but young enough to learn a lesson. It's always good to learn lessons, always good to be open to learning. I was young enough to learn a lesson. I picked the top rater. I said, Joe, hand me that TR. I want to catch that fish. She followed it. Now she's going to be ready to go. I'm telling you, I think I barely got a cast out when I see Joe, that telltale JB hooks that, I got her, get the net, in the water. You can just see the big mouth erupt. He hammered her. The butt kicker is one of the most classic stories, a case in point where a Double-10, the big profile lure, gets the job done. It was hilarious, and let me tell you, when that muskie hit the bag, I looked at Joe. I said, dude, you kicked my butt on that one. I learned a lesson. The Double-10 has a time and a place. Be strategic about it, okay? So, the technique. There are, generally speaking, 3 scenarios that I use as far as technique is concerned with the Double-10. And again, I'm going to talk from my perspective of generally throwing it strategically and throwing it with purpose in limited scenarios. Because again, even us younger guys, we get tired. Even if you don't think you do, that's fine. There's some select fellas and gals out there that probably throw these things for 14 hours straight. But again, I don't need to catch muskies. It's situational. But when I do go hard with the Double-10. And so again, I'm going to give you a scenario here. My first muskie clip that I showed you here to start the vlog off is High Moon and a Perfect Plan. That fish, when I threw that Double-10 in there, I knew she was in that area. I'm hauling on this thing. I'm cranking very fast. So technique number 1 with the Double-10 is when you're casting this either on a spot where you've got a big muskie holding, or it's a cast back for a muskie that literally just came in a moment ago. When you cast that Double-10 out there, you are not going in there slow rolling it. I'm saying the scenario here is midsummer. I ain't slow rolling the Double-10 right now. I am burning it. You make them want it. Get that, just burn it in. And you either want to just get it moving super quick or even bulge the surface. Even better would be get this thing high enough where you're actually producing a wake, a bulge, just this big round blob of water that gets pushed as you retrieve the Double-10 directly under the surface with tons of retrieving power. You want to bulge it in. You want to make them want it. You're casting it. Again, what's your purpose? Trigger an aggressive strike. Throw something really big in there, really loud and obnoxious, tons of size and noise, and you want to send it in there with purpose. You're not willy-nilly throwing that Double-10 in there. If you're sending it in there, send it in with purpose. With that said, I've talked about this. My other technique is slow rolling, which is literally the exact opposite. But it's done during the cold water period. When I'm fishing in October and November, I'm fishing it fairly slow. And that goes for my third technique, which is trolling. I troll the Double-10 quite a bit. It's actually a fantastic trolling lure. If you've got one guy on the deep edge with the deep break line with a depth raider, you can have another guy off the shallow side with a Double-10. We're going I mean, literally between 1 and 2.5. I mean, maybe 3, but barely 3 miles per hour. We're trolling really slow. So cold water period, I'll cast it, I'll troll it, but I'm going slow. And that's again why I can throw it for a long period of time in the fall, is because I'm not hauling on it. I'm just kind of wheeling on in. During the fall, the weeds have died down. You've got a lot more space between the cover and the surface. You've got more space to slow roll it. During the late spring and summer, midsummer period, you don't have that luxury, so you're not slow rolling it as much during the summer, unless you're over open water. Now, equipment, and I'm going to talk about 2 parts on this. We got the rod and the reel, because on this one, in my previous vlogs on blades, I haven't really keyed in on the reels as much, but I will on this particular lure, because it's kind of mandatory, I think. So, the rod. I think the best rod for bucktail fishing should be between, I will go as low as 8, but realistically, the one that I love is an 8'6" to a 9. St. Croix makes an 8'6" heavy power fast action in their Legend Tournament Muskie or their Legend Elite Muskie. I love the LEM 8'6" heavy power fast. And you need, now it's not just, you should, you need the heavy power rod for the big blades. Why do you need the heavy power rod? Now, we aren't really talking as much on the figure 8, because we just hit on that with the last vlog with the double 800 twin tinsel. But with the double 10, you can't get away with the medium heavy like you could on the double 8. With the double 10, you need the heavy power. And the reason being is because if you don't have the heavy power rod, you're going to be figure 8ing your double 10, and literally your rod is going to be bending like a banana. It's going to be bending like a horseshoe as you try to make these turns. In a sense, what it does is it actually makes the size, you got this big long rod, but if you've got a medium or a medium heavy power rod, it makes your figure 8 very tiny, because the rod is actually flexing and bending so much over, because of the resistance due to those giant blades spinning. So you need a heavy power rod. Let's just say this. If you're not throwing double 10s because you've had a bad experience and because you've been throwing them on a medium heavy, then you're missing the boat. You've got to throw them on the heavy power. Specifically, I guess you'd even say for launching the lure is kind of awkward. It's got these big airplane size, these airplane wing blades on it. You've got to have a little bit of a stiffness to fire that thing out there. You need the stiffness to fire the double 10. It's a big lure. And you need the stiffness. You need a little more heavy power in that rod to figure 8 it properly and make the big wide turns that the 8'6" length rod allows. So that's one thing that is, I will not budge on that. You've got to have the heavy power. Even an extra heavy power, you could get away with it. Occasionally, I'll throw it on the 7.6 extra heavy, but generally speaking, my rod of choice, again, I can't say it enough, LEM 86HF. Now, the reel. Any large bait caster will work. I don't care if it's a round reel. I don't care if it's a low profile reel. It doesn't matter. But to me, the important thing is that you have a low gear ratio. And by low gear ratio, I mean 5.1 to 1 or 4.6 to 1. The reason for that, okay, is that you have, so every revolution of your actual reel handle, so that would be, we'll just write this up here. I've got my marker ready, 5.1 to 1. So what that means is that for every, we'll call this revolution of your reel handle, you have 5.1 turns, I'll just call it turns to differentiate, of the spool. Okay, now this would be power. And this is what I'm looking for your double 10s, and even to a certain extent your double 8s or big lures. I'll throw this gear ratio, we'll get to this in another vlog. The 9-inch shallow rater, tons of resistance. I love throwing it on a 5.1 to 1. Even a 4.6. 4.6 to 1 is a fantastic, that's even easier. Now, what I'm comparing this to is my all-around, my general purpose, I call it this, general purpose General purpose gear ratio would be 6.1 to 1. It doesn't look like much of a difference, but if you're trying to fish double tens effectively with even, you can get away with it with a 6.1, but the reason I'm saying go with a lower gear ratio is so that you can do it effectively. You're not burning yourself out, even when you're throwing, because again, think about this on a given day. I mean, let's say an average muskie hunt could be between 10 and 14 hours long, easily 10 hours, but usually it's more than that when you're really getting into it. I may be throwing the double 10, 5-6 times over the course of a day for prolonged periods of time. Maybe I'm exclusively targeting big muskies and I'm burning and churning, I'm bulging the surface. You don't want to be doing this with a high speed, or this really wouldn't be a high speed reel. 7.1 or 8.1 to 1 would be high speed reels, but you want to be throwing this with a low gear ratio so that you can, alleviate some of the stress on the body. That's really why we've got the long rods and these fancy reels, is because it makes it easier on us and we can fish for longer periods of time. Now, as I do with all my vlogs here, I talk about modifications. I gave you guys the secret with the egg sinker, the drop shot technique to avoid lure twist, especially when it comes to trolling your double tens. I will use those egg sinkers to kind of make an anchor point so that the lure does not twist as much. And the other thing that I do is increase the hook size, especially when I'm fishing on trophy bodies of water. I go to either a 7/0 or an 8/0 wide gap short shank hook. I do prefer a shorter size on my double 8s and double 10s, but again, that really doesn't matter. The other thing I will say on modifications, and the Magnums by JBO come with actually a front treble. I take that off. The reasons for that are that, and this is again, so modifications actually remove one of those treble hooks. You can use it as a backup hook, or you can use it for another lure. And you can put it on a 700 Buchertail. Take that middle hook. So what I'm getting at here again is your hook on those Magnums. I'll just draw it out and make sure I'm not confusing anybody here. But you're going to remove that middle hook. So here's your tinsel. Here's your big blades, and you're going to have a treble hook here, and of course your main treble hook here. I remove this one. Remove. Remove that middle treble and use it for something else. Reasons being, a couple things are, one, that this can get tangled in the tinsel and cause a mess, and two, muskies, generally speaking, just so it causes tangles, and also most of the muskies that I've caught on double 10s or double 8s, they really are just mainly hooked on that back, the rear treble. So that's something else. Now, I will come out with this particular video, and I know Joe has one on his channel, and I can leave a link to it in the description. But last modification, I should have mentioned this on my double 8, but it's okay because I'll put a video together about this, exclusively about shrink wrap tubing. Shrink tubing, and now again, these lures come with shrink tubing, okay? Out of the box, it's JB already does this, but again, you're going to be catching muskies on these lures. The shrink wrap tubing, I'm just going to draw it in red just to highlight it, okay? The shrink tubing goes over the split ring, over the initial part of that the shank of your treble hook, and goes up onto the actual lure there, the shaft of the lure. And what that does is it prevents, again, more tangling from happening, because that's the biggest thing. This big rear treble will slide forward on the cast, will flip forward and tangle up in the tinsel and cause a big ball and a mess. And if you get a strike, when that happens, I would just cry. You wish that upon not even your worst enemies. So anyway, those are my modifications. Guys, in sum, the Magnum Double-10 Buchertail, it is just an awesome, and truly gets the category from me of big fish lure. It is a lure that, again, I'm using situationally because it's big, it's heavy, it's mean, and it's tough to retrieve, but it also catches big, mean, and heavy muskies that are tough to retrieve. It does just that. It's tough to work, and it also catches them. Use it situationally. Go after large muskies that are aggressive to trigger strikes. In the peak season, I'm cranking it. I'm bulging the surface. I'm really bringing the heat. And in the fall, I'm slow rolling it, and I'm fishing it slow, but I'm using its big presence to trigger strikes and to get some reaction out of these big lunkers that are holding. So, guys, as always, I hope you have enjoyed vlog number 8 as much as I have. I absolutely enjoy bringing this to you guys. I love talking to you guys, and I hope that you guys are enjoying these. As always, thanks for watching.